Hello, folks. Welcome back to Celebrate Recovery's Principles and Testimonies. I'm your host, Jason. If you're new to this channel, go ahead and give me the thumbs up doodle. And if you like, hit the subscribe button and the little belly for all future notifications. And if not, I hope you enjoy. Today's video is brought to you by James 414 Vape Sales. That's James 414 Vape Sales. They're out of Mount Vernon, Kentucky. They're out there on 461 on the way to Somerset. I personally call it Vape Heaven. So if you guys are out there and you vape, and they have all accessories, they got a wide variety of juices. And I personally know the owners, and they are beautiful, beautiful people. Today, we're on Principle 8 testimony, which is the last of the testimonies, the Celebrate Recovery Leadership Guide. And I'm sure the Dream Team will find something else to make videos on. I'm planning on doing the 12 and 12 from AA. It's 12 steps, and here, hold on, I'll go get it. Okay, I'm back, and this is the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. It is an AA book. It's an Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to get back to the AA, the Dream Team. The co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous tells us how members recover and how the society functions. But that's for future videos. For right now, we're on Principle 8. This is the first time it's been a man and a woman speaking. So it's set up like a play. It'll say Mac ... the semicolon, or I think that's what you call it. And then it'll be him talking. And then it'll say Mary, and it'll have a semicolon, and it'll have her talking, which is strange because my woman is named Mary. Anyway, when Mary talks, I'll hold up two fingers. When Mac is speaking, I'll hold up one. It'll be like Mac, and then Mary. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into it. I finally got my main clave straightened up and cleaned up, and got my arcade going in the background. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. Principle 8, Testimony. It says, "Hi, my name is Mac, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with drug and alcohol addiction. I have lived to see a milestone in my recovery. After 24 years in recovery, I've finally been sober longer than I was using. My childhood was pretty uneventful in terms of abuse. My parents loved me and set good standards to live by. So I can't look back and blame others for my actions that brought great shame. Today, because of Jesus Christ, I don't have to live in the past anymore. I am free. Ironically, though, I've spent a lifetime searching for freedom in all the wrong things. My dad was in the military, so by the time I was 15, I had moved 8 times. I learned to blend in and make friends quickly. My dad preached wherever he was stationed, so I knew about God, heaven, and hell. Excuse me. I thought unless you were a Christian, you would go to hell. I remember fear being the motivating factor for being baptized when I was 12. I appeared to enter a relationship with God, but for all the wrong reasons. 2 weeks later at summer camp, I was introduced to marijuana by one of the counselors. I found a group of people who looked like they were having a lot of fun, so I decided, who needs to live in fear? these people wasn't worried about anything. I become fearless and believed I was invincible, not realizing I had set a pace for eventual destruction. My dad retired from the military and went to seminary to become a full-time pastor, so we moved to Louisiana when I was 15. I hated the fact that we were moving and wondered how would I ever find friends who liked doing what I like to do now. Amazingly, within the first week I found the same people there. I never ran out of drugs and acceptance was immediate. Once we arrived, my parents sent me to church summer camp to straighten me out. That's where I met Mary. Mary. My name is Mary, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with codependency. I grew up an elder's kid. My parents live out the Deuteronomy verse to tie God's word as symbols around your hands and to teach them to your children as you walk by them day after day. There was always guests at the dinner table in our home. Missionaries from foreign countries stayed with us for recharging, while others flocked to our home seeking wise counsel, Bible studies, and to repair their wrecked marriages. During my childhood, my mother would write Bible verses on 3 by 5 cards and tape them all over the bathroom walls. As I would get dressed in the morning, there, staring me in the face, would be several verses I would read over and over. It just became habit without me even realizing it. My sister and I would throw our head under the cover at night and giggle, thinking how silly it was to having our mama reciting these verses to us, never realizing the impact they would have on me in the years to come. I confessed Jesus as Lord of my life when I was 12 years old and was baptized, telling myself I would never sin again. I wanted to please God with all my heart. Mac. A new school year began. Mary was a senior and I was a junior. Life was great. After a few months of dating, I talked Mary into having sex for the first time for both of us by using the manipulative "if you loved me" line. 2 weeks later, she didn't start her period, but we thought, no way, surely one time can't get you pregnant. Mary. 4 months later, I finally consulted a doctor, and yes, I was pregnant. No one had been pregnant outside of marriage in our church, so we had a secret. I felt alone and was convinced Matt couldn't support us. He was only 16 at the time. By the time I was 5 months pregnant, I decided it was confession time to my dad. During my childhood, my mother had mental illness, and doctors put her through experimental procedures and electric shock treatments. She suffered in mental hospitals and was a test subject for drugs that often kept her debilitated. So, needless to say, my sweet mother, who loved me the best way she knew how, didn't notice I had grown a belly. I had always been able to talk to my dad, and I knew I couldn't keep it from him any longer. I walked into the den, and where my dad was taking a nap, and I had snuggled up next to him many times throughout the years on that big old flowered sofa, where he read Bible stories to me, and we talked about God's love. I knelt down to him. I knelt down next to him, eye to eye, and softly said, "We need to talk, Daddy." I was prepared for him to point his fingers and say all kinds of harsh words, but tears began streaming down his cheeks, and he said he would support and love me always. I told him my plans for moving out of town and giving up my baby for adoption. I left home for my secret summer trip 3 months later, on August 17th, 1975. That date is significant later in our story. The doctor left me in a tiny room all alone. Labor lasted for 12 hours with no anesthesia and no family. As they rushed me into the delivery room, a nurse shoved gas mask over my face. I thought they were suffocating me to punish me for what I had done. I woke later in bed. I woke later in a bed, sheets soaking wet from perspiration and tears. I experienced emotions that were alien to me. A time that was supposed to be the happiest time in my life was the saddest. I moved to a Christian college out of state. My dad was hoping to get me away from Mac. But I followed her there. My parents thought by sending me to a Christian college they would fix me. Guess what? I found the people who love to party my first day on campus. In fact, I found the guy who first introduced me to pot 6 years earlier at church camp. Halfway through the semesters, I was kicked out of college after sneaking out of the dorm past curfew to smoke a joint with a friend. Mary and I both went home and married 3 weeks later. Married life was great. We partied all the time, and later we would come to understand it helped us to mask the guilt of giving up our baby. When we had been married 3 years, we started trying to have another baby. Mary told me she was quitting the partying. I said, go ahead, but I'm not. Even in the midst of my addiction, I set a boundary and decided to quit everything except smoking pot. I convinced myself that marijuana wasn't so bad, which a lot of people do. As I continued down the road of drug addiction, the conflict began between us. Our 2 daughters were born during this time. However, we lived separate lives under the same roof while growing further apart. I stayed away from the house as much as possible, working overtime to pay for my drug habit. By this time, meth had become my drug of choice. Mary. In time, I came to the realization that our marriage was totally unmanageable, and I couldn't survive without turning my life and hurts over to God. I'd quit trying to be Mac's Holy Spirit and fix him, and instead work on my own shortcomings. I started seeking the pathway to peace, while Mac continued running down the path to destruction. This pattern continued for 7 years. I held on to the verses I remembered reading as a child on my bathroom wall. In Isaiah 55:11, it says, God's word is spoken. It does not come back empty, but will accomplish what he desires and achieve for the purpose of which he sent it. I would also repeat Isaiah 41:10 to myself the way I remembered my mother quoting it slowly and distinctively. I felt God was speaking to me. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. All those scriptures I heard as a child were coming back to me, comforting me during the dark and lonely nights. Now I had two secrets I carried. We had a son we would never know, and I had an insane husband. I say insane because I did not know all the drugs he was doing and their effects. So I walked on eggshells to keep the peace. I wore a mask to church every Sunday, and I just wanted my insides to feel like everyone else looked on the outside. Perfect, I thought. Mac. Amazingly, Amazingly enough, even as a drug addict, there was a line I said I would never cross. The last 2 years of my addiction, I was shooting up 10 to 12 times a day. I wore long sleeve shirts all the time, so no one would notice the marks on my arm. I slept only about 16 hours a week. One Sunday morning, God gave me a great gift at the time, and I didn't even realize it. It was a moment of clarity. I was crushed. I was crashed out on the bed, and our 4-year-old daughter stood beside the bed and said to her mother, "Why doesn't Daddy go to church with us anymore?" Mary said, "He's been working hard. He needs sleep." Our daughter replied, "Well, if he doesn't go to church, then I'm not going either." I pretended to be asleep and not to hear what she said. They left for church, and then all of a sudden, I felt like I ran into a brick wall. God used that little girl to break my heart. I realized I was killing everybody I claimed to love. It was as if my eyes were open for the first time, seeing the insanity of it all. So I collected all of my drugs and paraphernalia and burnt them. Mary. I was crushed realizing our children were being affected. That Sunday, the sermon was on confession and how it was good for the soul. I remember the song, "It Is Well With My Soul." The words hung in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to just run out of the building. Arriving home, I found Mac sitting on the recliner with tears in his eyes. Mac. I was raised to believe that men shouldn't cry or show weakness. But what I found in those tears that morning was relief. I'd never known. I told Mary that all that I had done and that I wanted to start a new life. For the first time, Mary stepped out of her codependency and said, "Mary, who are you going to call? I'm tired of keeping secrets." Mac. I told you I'm through with that life. What more do you want? Mary. We need someone to help us. Would you talk to the pastor? Mac. Our pastor had been coming to my cabinet shop for years, getting me to build things for him, only to find out later that they were things he really didn't need. He saw something in me that nobody else did, so he came over to pray with us. He said I didn't have to confess before the church, but I might help someone else if I did. I knew I needed to be held accountable. Mary and I responded to an altar call that Sunday night, expecting to be shunned by people. The whole church came down afterwards and cried with us, which is a good church. They didn't know what to do with me. I was their first drug addict, but they loved me and said to keep coming back. There was one lady who said I needed to go to AA. I thought she was talking about some kind of car club. She said not AAA, but AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Mary wanted me to talk to someone at the rehab center the next day. I told her I wasn't crazy and didn't need that. I finally agreed to talk, but nothing else. But nothing more. After much discussion with the head guy, he asked me if I would stay. I said, "Okay, I guess I'll stay, but I have to go home and get my stuff." Mary. "That's okay. Your stuff is in the trunk." Mac. Our life became a whirlwind of rehab, 90 meetings in 90 days, Bible studies, and making new friends. A whole new life had begun for us. We started Overcomers 2 years later, which we led for 14 years. We had approximately 20 to 30 people who came on a regular basis. Mary. The only other people who knew about our son were my dad and my brothers and his wife. Fast forward to spring 1988, 1 month after Mac yielded to God. 1 month after Mac yielded to God, and when God gave us a surprise gift. Our church youth group was going to a rally 5 hours away, and my sister-in-law was one of the chaperones. They were signing groups to stay in homes, and by the time they got to my sister-in-law's group, they had run out of homes. So they were asked if they would mind staying in a town close by. My sister-in-law asked if they, as the suitcases were being loaded into a car of a friendly couple, my sister-in-law asked if they had any children. When the woman said they had a son named Heath, a funny feeling came over my sister-in-law, who asked his age. Heath's mother said he was 12, so my sister-in-law went one step further and asked, when is his birthday? Heath's mother said, August 17th, the date our firstborn. Heath arrived on August 17th, 1975. At 2 a.m., our phone rang, and my sister-in-law whispered, "You'll never imagine where I am." I said sleepily, "Where?" She replied, "Heath's bed." A family at our church has the last name Heath, so I questioned her. "What are you doing in Mr. Heath's bed?" She exclaimed, "No, no, Heath, your son." Mac and I feel God gave us the gift at that time in our lives to reassure us our son was loved and cared for in a Christian home. After waiting 7 more years, in August 1994, we got a call we had always hoped we would get. When Heath was about to turn 19, his parents contacted us that he would like to meet us on his birthday. His dad was in charge of My dad was in charge of videoing the momentous occasion, but we sat down later to view it, and the whole first part of the reunion video was showing the ground. My dad was so excited he forgot he was holding the camera. It had been 17 years since we first met Heath. He didn't get we didn't get to see Heath's natural birth, but we were blessed with witnessing his spiritual birth as Mac baptized him in 2005. Heath's parents moved into our city, and Heath's mother and my mom became the best of friends as she took care of my mom after my dad died. We also attended the same church and celebrating holidays together. Our family continues to grow as God has blessed us with 8 grandchildren. Mac. After leading Overcomers for 13 years, Mary's brother happened to be at Saddleback Church and told me about a ministry called Celebrate Recovery, and I thought I ought to check it out. So 2004, we attended the summit. During the second day, I told Mary, "We're stopping what we're doing and starting this. Look how many people we can help. More than just drug addicts and alcoholics, anyone with a hurt, hang up, or habit." After 120 days of prayer and preparation, we started Celebrate Recovery at our church on New Year's Eve 2004. During this preparation time, I learned about Principle 8 and realized that this is exactly what God had in mind for us. Principle 8 states, yield myself to God to be used to bring His good news to others, both by my example and by my words. Happy are those who are persecuted because they do what God requires. Matthew 5:10. This is why we went through all of these trials, and then we found out there was more. I love watching God's plans for our life unfold. A few years ago, a pastor of 40 years tried to commit suicide. The Pharisees in the church finally got to him, and the only way he could get through the week by doing something he said he would never do, take a drink. That one drink turned into every Monday. He had been drinking the last 10 years, and nobody except his wife knew. Finally, he couldn't take the hypocrisy of his own life anymore, and that's when he attempted suicide. Along with the bottle, he took a handful of pills. He was moved from pastor to one of those people. So I got the call to go visit him. I visited him in the ICU and even though he was unconscious, I prayed over him, saying, "Don't give up." God still has a plan for you. Over the next few weeks, I was able to share with him about the hope that God still had for him. He later became a part of our Celebrate Recovery ministry. While at one of our small groups, he shared with me that he had just met our son's parents at church on Sunday. I said, everybody has. They go to church here now. And he said, no, you don't understand. 40 years ago, when I first became a pastor, I performed their marriage ceremony. Before our son was even conceived, God had a plan to use this man to marry the couple that would adopt our son, and then later allowed me to be instrumental in giving him the hope that his relationship could not only be restored, but also God would continue to use him. God always sees the big picture, and he is always right on time. Mary, Mary. We went from 20 to 30 people attending our Overcomers meeting group, a ministry that was already working, to an average attendance of over 250 every Friday night at Celebrate Recovery. Our children is part of Celebrate Recovery. They serve as roles as state representative, ministry leader, training coach, open share group leaders, nursery worker, videographer, and youth minister. 24 years ago, I prayed God would just keep Mac awake in church. God has truly taken the ashes of our lives and turned them into something beautiful. I believe when God said in Joel 2:25, I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. Stout. I love that verse. Let me repeat that. Joel 2:25. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. We can't keep quiet about what the Lord has done in our lives and the lives of our Celebrate Recovery Forever family. If there is restoration for us, there is hope for you too. Don't give up. Put your faith into action by making life's healing choices. Mac. Being on the front line of what I believe is the outreach ministry for the church, which is totally true. And personally, the Celebrate Recovery is the outreach for my local churches too. So that is just a beautiful line. Being on the front line of what I believe is the outreach ministry for the church, we're able to bind up the brokenhearted and proclaim freedom for the captives of sin in Jesus' name, and release the darkness of the prisoners of hurts, hang-ups, and habits. Celebrate Recovery has helped us reach more hurting people and to find healing than we could have ever imagined. How can we repay the Lord for his goodness? We share the hope we found in Jesus. Today we are making life's healing choices, and that's Celebrate Recovery. Thank you for letting us share. Uh, that is that is there's one more lesson in the Celebrate Recovery's leadership guide that I will get to, and I will read it, and then I'll complete the book. And that'd be the second book I've completed for my whole life since I've been out of rehab. Uh, but I found it a very astonishing book. I will continue to read it because I plan on being a leader in Celebrate Recovery and an AA Nazi, as they call it. But I believe you need both programs. Uh, it has been instrumental to me, the literature. You got to, and for me personally, literature is a big thing in my recovery. And until next time, one Celebrate Recovery time, one Celebrate Recovery place, and one Celebrate Recovery channel. Dream Team, over and out. Thank you, everyone.